Please welcome to the stage Kathleen Sprose Cummings, John A. O'Brien, Collegiate Professor of American Studies and History.
Thank you all for joining us. I am delighted to welcome you to this afternoon's conversation on healing our national dialogue and political life, featuring Cardinal Robert McElroy and Father Robert Dowd. I am the director of Notre Dame's Global Catholic Research Initiative, and one of its goals is to continue to place the university's scholarly resources at the service of the Church, using research on Catholicism past and present to inform and to respond to contemporary challenges and to promote dialogue on difficult topics. One way that we have long done this at Notre Dame is through the Notre Dame Forum. Established in 2005, the Notre Dame Forum is an annual series that invites campus-wide reflection and dialogue about issues of importance to the university, the nation, and the world. This year, Father Dowd has chosen the theme, Cultivating Hope. His choice was beautifully and deliberately timed to coincide with the 2025 Jubilee year. Every 25 years, the Catholic Church celebrates a Jubilee, inviting the faithful throughout the world to renewal, forgiveness, mercy, and pilgrimage. If not a physical pilgrimage to Rome, then a spiritual journey in our hearts. Pope Francis selected Pilgrims of Hope as the theme for the 2025 Jubilee. We all know that much of our national political discourse has become largely unproductive, stressful, and disrespectful. Today's timely conversation seeks to get to the root of our societal divides and offer insights and strategies for moving forward together toward a more unified future. We are extremely fortunate to have two interlocutors who are not only pilgrims of hope, but purveyors of hope. Father Bob has made hope a hallmark of his presidency. In his inaugural address just over a year ago, he invited the Notre Dame community to join him in building bridges and in sustaining hope. This conversation today is merely his latest attempt to nourish and nurture hope in our university community, in our nation, and throughout the world. Father Bob's conversation partner today is also a marketer of hope. Just 2 weeks ago, at the Red Mass at St. Matthew's Cathedral in Washington, D.C., Cardinal McElroy invited men and women who work in law and justice to become architects of hope, noting that hope is not the belief that everything comes out all right. That is merely optimism. No, hope is the conviction that in our moments of greatest suffering in our lives, God will stand by us always. It represents an overwhelming impulse in the depths of the human heart that does not obscure the suffering of the present or the past, but finds in them chapters of grace, with courage, a foundation for a new future. Like many of you, I suspect that I find myself these days often very weary and in need of inspiration. Thus, I am very much looking forward to this conversation with two men who have embroidered hope on their hearts and who strive to make the institutions they lead wellsprings of that hope. Today's event is co-sponsored by the Democracy Initiative, which seeks to establish Notre Dame as a leader in the study of democracy, both in the United States and worldwide, as a convener for conversations about and actions to preserve democracy, and as a model for the formation of civically engaged citizens and public servants. We are very grateful to them for their support of this event. I'd like to invite all of you to submit any questions you may have during the discussion via the QR codes on the screens. Father Dowd and Cardinal McElroy will address as many questions as they can following their discussion. For now, please join me in welcoming to the stage the 18th President of Notre Dame, Reverend Robert Dowd, and Cardinal Robert McElroy.
Great to see you all. Welcome, Cardinal.
Thank you.
Please join me. Thank you, Kathy. Thanks for that introduction. And it's great to be with all of you. Thank you for joining us here this afternoon. And thank you, Cardinal, for making your way back to Notre Dame. It's great to have you back here.
It's always good to be here.
So I have a little introduction. And I know you like brief introductions. This one might be a little longer than you like, but here we go. Cardinal McElroy was appointed to lead the Archdiocese of Washington earlier this year by Pope Francis, following nearly a decade of service as Bishop of San Diego. Cardinal McElroy is a native of California, and he was ordained a priest for the Archdiocese of San Francisco in 1980. His academic path reflects both deep faith and also intellectual curiosity. Among other degrees, he holds a doctorate in sacred theology from the Gregorian University in Rome and a PhD in political science from Stanford. So a fellow political scientist. It's good to be with a fellow political scientist here. Pope Francis appointed him cardinal in 2022. He is currently a member of the Vatican's Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development and the Dicastery for Laity, Family, and Life, both central to the Church's engagement around the world. And I'm glad to say that Cardinal McElroy is no stranger to Notre Dame. He has all kinds of great Notre Dame connections. His brother is a graduate, his sister is a graduate, his sister-in-law is a graduate, and so is his niece. So great Notre Dame connections. Also, he was here on campus in 2023 for a forum conversation on the moral challenges of war and peace. And this past August, I had the great privilege of being together with Cardinal McElroy in Japan, together with other church leaders from the United States. We were there to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And that was a somber, but also a very inspiring experience. And it was great to be there together with Cardinal McElroy. Cardinal McElroy has frequently spoken about the church's role as similar to that of a field hospital, reminiscent, of course, of Pope Francis. A field hospital where mercy and compassion are our first impulses, and where we do not look away from those things in our world that are hard and difficult. In his homily delivered upon his installation as Archbishop of Washington, he reminded us that, and I quote, "We are called to be pilgrims of hope in a wounded world, not ignoring the suffering that abounds, but letting it call us to bring the gospel more deeply into our lives, into our nation, and into our world." It's clear that Cardinal McElroy is an ideal person to have to our campus to talk about what it means to cultivate hope. So please join me in extending a warm welcome to Cardinal Robert McElroy. Now, Cardinal, I understand, first of all, I understand you're not staying for our game tomorrow. You have to get back to Washington.
I have a ceremony tomorrow night in Washington, but I do want to say one thing. Although I am a Californian, I never root for USC.
I am so. I kind of took that for granted,
Yes.
but I'm glad to hear that confirmed, that you confirmed that. But the weather forecast tomorrow is not looking great, and we could probably use a few prayers from you.
I'll give you those.
Maybe if you stay, that somehow the weather will improve. But anyway, just great to have you here. Thank you so much. So after 10 years of ministry in the Diocese of San Diego, you were installed as Archbishop of Washington. That's a big transition. You went from one coast essentially to the other coast. You went to our nation's capital. What has struck you about this new role as serving the Archdiocese of Washington, especially at this particular moment? Has anything surprised you as you've taken on this new responsibility in the Archdiocese of Washington?
Well, being Archbishop of Washington is different on certain levels than being Bishop of San Diego. When I was Bishop of San Diego, it's a larger diocese. There are about 1.5 million Catholics. But my primary role was leading the parish, school communities, all of the social services, working with the people whom the church serves and the communities of faith. So that was my primary role there and my overwhelming role there. Washington is different in the sense there are 3 levels to the role of being Archbishop of Washington. The most important is still working with the parishes and the schools and the communities of faith, because that's the heart of the church. And so for the past 6 months, I've met with all the priests individually, and then through a synodal process of dialogue, I asked each of the pastors to appoint 3 representatives from parish leadership. And I met with them in groups of 15 to try to get their perspective on their parishes and then the wider life within the archdiocese. So overwhelmingly, that is my role as Archbishop of Washington. But there are 2 other dimensions in Washington that I did not have in San Diego. The first one is that because it is the capital, many Catholic institutions in the country have either headquarters there, educational institutions there, social service centers there. So part of my work as Archbishop is collaborating with all of those groups in the city of Washington. And then the other one is, because it is the nation's capital, there's a role I have whenever I speak on the moral dimensions of public policy questions. Now, in the United States, there's a conference of bishops, and the conference of bishops is the official liaison between the bishops of the United States and the government of the United States in terms of speaking out. So my role is not that. But as the Archbishop of Washington, as any bishop faces, we have to speak to the moral dimensions of public policy from time to time. And because it's in Washington, it has a resonance that it would not have elsewhere. As to the surprises, I would say this. Having gone around now, the Archdiocese of Washington is Washington, D.C., and then 5 counties of southern Maryland. And so what I've been surprised by is the diversity of those communities. There are neighborhoods within Washington, D.C., very distinct from one another, with differing histories, lots of transitions going on, ethnic and demographic change going on, lots of young people. And then in the counties of Maryland, there's some counties with great wealth, and there are other counties that are middle class. And then the southern counties in Maryland are more rural. And they have a deep and abiding sense of history, because that's where Catholicism came in Maryland, and thus the birth really of Catholicism in the United States. So there are many small churches there that are parishes in our diocese, and they have a wonderful sense of history. So I've been surprised, not that there's diversity, but that breadth of diversity. So that was more, it was more interesting and complicated than I would have thought. So
Great. I mean, it's a large archdiocese. It's in our nation's capital, and it is very diverse, and suppose in many ways very different from the Diocese of San Diego, which is also a very diverse diocese, but I suppose in different ways. But do you find that because you're Archbishop of Washington and you're a political scientist, and you have been engaged in the national dialogue even before arriving in Washington, that people expect you to speak out on the issues of the day and comment on policy and politics?
they do. And that's one of the things I have to wrestle with, because my primary role is to be a bishop of the communities there, all right? I'm not there primarily to speak certainly on political issues. That's not the centerpiece of what I do. And sometimes people expect that be the centerpiece of what I do. Yes, and partly because I have written on things and spoken on things in the past. So it's important for me to always keep anchored in that reality of what my true role is and my primary role is. At the same time, people often ask me, it depends whatever I get into. If I get into discussing the question of abortion, for example, or get into the question of poverty, people from opposite sides will write to me and say, you're getting into politics, okay? And so where they don't mind it on the other one, and so it's important to understand what the church's role in this all is, in its own understanding. The church has no specific role in the order of politics or the order of public policy. There is no specifically political role for the church, period. The church has a moral role within the political and public order to speak to the morality of issues. And I think it's a very key distinction because people mix it up all the time. People think the church should or should not be involved in politics, or that if it's speaking to a question, it's automatically a political response. And it's not. It needs to be rooted in the moral understanding. I need to always come at that, and the church always needs to come at it. Is there a moral question here that's of import? And if it is, then the church contributes to the public debate in a couple of different ways. One is to help illuminate the fact that there are moral questions here, that we can't simply reduce. Many questions in our society are purely political, purely about power, economics, and so on. Many, though, raise the deepest human questions of morality. And all through our history, it's been important that religious leaders contribute to the debate on this question. At the beginning of our country, we sometimes forget this because we've been in existence now for almost 250 years. But when the country was launched, it was an experiment. There had not been a republic really of any size, since the Roman Republic. And for that reason, this was a very dangerous proposition. And the founders believed on a very deep level, it could only succeed if religion flourished. And here's why they believed that. They believed that only religion could generally bring from the human heart a sense of the willingness to look past self-interest or group interest to a wider sense of what the common good is. So for that reason, they thought religion was essential, not in a direct force in politics, certainly, or governance, but rather in contributing in the human heart and in the understanding of the issues that come forth. So that's the background for the church's role in speaking to political issues. It speaks not in terms of the politics, or it should not speak in terms of the politics, but rather solely of the moral questions involved.
You've often talked about the importance of transforming our political discourse in this country and the need to make essentially 3 transitions in order to achieve this transformation or begin this transformation. I'm going to read aloud each of these, and maybe after each, you could just say a few words about what you mean. The first transition is from grievance to gratitude. From grievance to gratitude.
We're not unique as a country in this regard, but we're one of a small minority of countries where, for us, the ties that bind us are not ties of blood or ethnicity. We are not a nation founded because we have common ties of blood. We are bound together by the aspirations of our founders, who have tried to live out those aspirations, often with great success, many times with failure and thus reform, and the need for change. But it is that which binds us together as a people. it's a wonderful thing, particularly for us as people of faith, that what binds us is the aspirations to freedom and human dignity, care for all, the rights of all, the empowerment of all democratic rights. But our patriotism, thus, as Americans, is not a possession. We are not proud to be Americans primarily because we were born here. We're proud to be Americans because of what our country aspires to be and to do. And I have to say, that's a very faith-filled approach to patriotism in terms of Catholic understanding of things too. That our ties to our country really come from the country's willingness to try to live out the core of the gospel. And one of the things is there's a beauty to this vision. And we've always got to know that there have been tremendous failures in the way the vision was brought about in the first place or envisioned, and also how it was implemented in various ways. And thus the country tries to change and reform in these various ways. So we don't want to canonize it as one time they had all the right answers, but rather it is hopefully a self-reforming vision which calls us always to try to seek those values ever more deeply in the age in which we live. And that's a beautiful thing. And one of my worries in the present moment is I don't hear people speaking with a sense of beauty for that we have inherited and that binds us together. I remember we're coming on the 250th anniversary, and fights have already begun about how it will be celebrated on the smallest subjects. Okay. I remember the bicentennial. How many of you are old enough to remember the bicentennial? Okay. That was a beautiful moment because we were able at that moment, for the most part, to capture parts of that dream and to dwell on it. And so my concern on this question on why we need to transition from grievance to gratitude is that I think tremendously we have become a nation of grievance, where we focus more on what is lacking, and particularly what is lacking for me or my group, rather than on that which binds us together. So I think our way out of this is in part going to be trying to recapture that which binds us together on this very deep level.
The second transition that you talk about is from the politics of warfare to shared purpose. From the politics of warfare to shared purpose.
Yes, I don't want to obscure the fact that politics has always been adversarial in the sense in the United States. We can't underestimate it. But there was a shift that occurred in the 90s, and I would crystallize it in two moments that were almost simultaneously. One was in the Newt Gingrich's platform, the Contract with America, which launched in a particular direction in a way that was tendentious. At the same time, you had, remember in the Clinton administration, when they were elected, they had what they called politically the war room. Do you remember the war room? What was different was, and it was noted at the time, when he won the election, the war room continued. In other words, this mentality of warfare, which is a deeper, on both sides in that period, understanding of the conflict between the two parties, has done, I think, terrible damage to us. One indicator of that, I would say, is this. I won't quite get the numbers right, but something like this. In mid-60s, Atlantic Magazine asked people in a poll this question: would you be greatly distressed, greatly upset, if your son or daughter married someone from the opposite political party. You know what the answer was? What percentage? 5%. They did it a few years ago. It was 40%. It shows the shift that what has this notion of warfare, of tribalism, has seeped into us. And I think it's very, very destructive, in part because, and it's partly related to social media and the algorithms and all those things which take us to our corners and accelerate our anger at each other. But I believe that the party label has become shorthand now for worldview in the views of many, many people, perhaps a majority. That is, when you know who they're for in this fight, you know a lot more about them than who they're for politically. You know their whole worldview. And that, I think, is a very damaging development in our society. And so we have to, again, as a transition from that to more the sense of shared purpose and meaning and endeavor that we have, as one society.
And the third transition that you talk about is from insularity to compassion. From insularity to compassion.
Yes, Catholic social teaching crosses the spectrum, is really bifurcated by our political structure in the present day. On the Republican side tend to be more issues like abortion, euthanasia, certain aspects of religious liberty. On the Democratic side, there's more coalescence with issues, say, of poverty, of peace, and of the environment and human dignity. So because of that, now in one way it's good for the church because it prevents us from ever siding with any party because our views are absolutely bifurcated. But it makes it hard for Catholic voters. It also makes it hard for Catholic political officials. There are very few political officials who really represent even 70% of Catholic social teaching because of that barrier right in the middle that cuts it in two. Some years ago, maybe 15 years ago, the Bishops' Conference did a study on this question. How do we deal with the fact that our people are cut in half on this? And so they did all sorts of questions with people at all different levels in the life of the church. How can we bridge this gulf? And what they found was there was an answer, which is great. The answer was compassion. When people came at questions with a starting point of compassion, when they could see the suffering involved on various elements of the different issues that were divided, they could bridge together. It would bring them over the lines. Not everybody, but there was a coalescence. And so what they'd suggested, it didn't get implemented, we've gone the opposite direction, is that compassion is a way of understanding how do we as Catholics come at these issues in a way that bridges. They had a very interesting experiment in the state of Washington. They got together and they decided that for a period of 5 years, the diocese of the state would focus in terms of kind of social teaching and public policy on the child from conception until the age of 5. What that meant was the child in the womb and the child as they're growing and needing food and healthcare and all these different things. So it was a way of bridging the Catholic community together. They had some gatherings for that. And you had sides that, let's just say, didn't cooperate a lot generally. They cooperated a lot because there was this bridge. So I think compassion is a way to do. We're in a tough time on these questions, but it's not an irredeemable time. And there are ways that can bring us together. So I think these transitions would help us.
Yeah, incredibly insightful. And the question is, how do we make these transitions? How do we make these transitions? And does the church have a role to play do you think, in helping, at least helping the Catholic community to make these transitions, or the Christian community, the broader Christian community?
I do. And in a very real sense, much of this needs to take place on the parish level. It's in parish communities. Parish communities tend to be diverse, not uniformly diverse, but diverse in terms of these political bridging. So people understand one another. We did what was the synodal process in San Diego on it. And what they found was when people have been in their synodal sessions, people who diametrically disagreed on the substance of things, and were saying that in the dialogues, nonetheless came out feeling very bonded with one another because they were encountering them as people of faith. And so there was a much greater openness that came from that. It really was one of the, particularly the first set of sessions we did. Because we had note-taking, the University of San Diego had helped us to do a note-taking process for it. And the notes would come out, you'd see what people were saying. They were disagreeing all over the place. But they uniformly came out not only pleased with the process, but some of them formed small ongoing prayer sessions, groups, and different things. People across the divide. So I do think we have a role. How we make that in the wider society is a tougher thing.
Yes. And it's also, I think, notable that Pope Leo talked about the importance of bridge building almost immediately after becoming Pope as a theme. A missionary church going out into the world, moving beyond its comfort zone, but also engaging in the kind of bridge building I think that you're talking about. And so your academic background, both as someone who has a doctorate in sacred theology and also a doctorate in political science, gives you I think, special insight into both the teachings of the church and our political system. What can the U.S. political system learn from the church, and what can the church learn from the U.S. political system?
Let's see.
Anything.
I'm going to be in troubled waters on the second one.
The answer may be nothing.
This is a conversation. So is it okay if I give him the second part? Well, I would say two things now. One is in terms of Pope Francis's document, Fratelli Tutti, which talks about what love of neighbor is supposed to mean for us. I do think that would be a great help in our society for us to really grapple with that as individuals and as communities and as citizens and believers too in our public roles. And I think it's a vision that the love of neighbor is all encompassing. Okay? Now, it doesn't mean we can do everything, but it means we have to have that basic outlook on the people we encounter, even those who are, quote, our political adversaries. Okay. And the second is this synodal type of approach of discussion. We have to get back to discussions across lines in which we can talk about public policy issues and divisive issues without going to our corners. And one of the great, better than I, one of the great tragedies is within family life, this is corrosive. And so we need to move it. I think the church's, the synodal way of doing it, which engages in hard questions where people disagree, but the bondedness of understanding, we as citizens, we're all in this as members of one society, of a society with a great dream and a great history and a great potential and a lot to learn from and to do. So,
yes. So the theme, of course, of the Jubilee years, Pilgrims of Hope.
He let me skip over the second one.
Oh, we could get back to that. But anyway, we could come back to that if you like.
I'll answer the second one.
Yeah.
All right. I'd say there are two.
I was giving you a break there, but you are a courageous
That's right.
man, and
Well, Well, I'd say two things. What one is, and some of you would know this, there is all one area in the church's life that directly profited from the American experience, and that is the question of religious liberty. Before the Second Vatican Council, Catholic teaching was basically that if you lived in a country where it was a majority Catholic, the government had a responsibility to make Catholicism the official religion. If there was if there was not a majority of Catholic, then you did the best you can. But there was no there had to be rights for Catholics, but there was no right to have another religion be an official religion in Catholic teaching. And that was because there was a theological premise: error has no rights. That's because the other religions are all erroneous, they don't have rights. John Courtney Murray, who was a great Jesuit moral theologian, took the Catholic experience in the United States and basically, and the American bishops pressed this home too, said that to Rome: look, here's a country where there's no established religion, and yet Catholicism is flourishing, it's thriving, it's creative, it's energetic, it's faith-filled. And so partly because of that experience in this country, that the doctrine on religious liberty changed. Pope Benedict called that the greatest episode or chapter of doctrinal development of the history of Vatican Council, was the change in religious liberty. And it really came because of the experience in the United States. So in that way, the United States did teach. The other way, and this is going to get me into trouble, but is this. The democratic process in the United States, the way we do things in our society, is the role of women in the life of the church. I think the church is grappling with the role of women. It was a big issue at the Synod. I think we have much to learn within the church how to do that, and not this last Synod we had included many bishops, but there were over 100 delegates, mostly women, who were lay people, some religious women, some consecrated women. And it tremendously changed the conversation at the Synod. And so I do think that's one. Mm-hmm.
That is that's without a doubt something that there's more learning to do there. There's no doubt. And that's an important topic, women's role in the role of women in the church. And it's notable that Pope Francis named some women to rather high-ranking responsibilities in the Vatican, but no doubt we need to discern together about the way forward, because obviously women play such an important role in the church currently, and we need to find ways of amplifying their voices, for sure, and also putting to good use for the church their remarkable leadership skills, without a doubt. So this is a Jubilee year. The Jubilee theme is Pilgrims of Hope. What does it mean, and how can we be pilgrims of hope? To some extent, you've been alluding to this already, but I'd love to hear you reflect on this. But how can we be pilgrims of hope? And here, especially, let me bring it down to this. At a university like this, at a Catholic university, how can we cultivate hope here at a Catholic university? How can we be pilgrims of hope at a Catholic university like Notre Dame?
I would say working on the level of dialogue within the university, because partly we're talking about how do we get back to a time when we can talk with one another across these boundaries effectively, affectively, understanding, this American vision and society which we're all part of. So the university, I think, can help foster that, methods of dialogue that do that. I do want to say I am very hopeful on this in the long run. We're in a difficult moment now on this. But when I was in San Diego, we did a survey for the Citadel Project. And one of the things we did, it was mostly on church questions, but we put some questions in there that were meant to get at what is the level of polarization among our people, okay? And it had to do with questions both inside the church and outside the church or public policy. We received about 27,000 surveys on it. What was striking, now that's San Diego, and San Diego is different from here, but the core thing is I believe true more or less across the country. What it was, the two extremes, the two polarized parts were less than 20% apiece. Almost 60% of the people were in the middle. That is, they could be moved. They weren't in lockstep. They might identify with one side or the other, but they weren't in lockstep. To me, this gives great hope that we have to empower the middle, who have that openness to get beyond the strident identification with either side. This is the real impediment now.
Mm-hmm. And what gives you hope, or who gives you hope these days?
You know, where I see hope is in the parish communities when I visit there. I've been visiting all the parishes, and you see people of tremendous heroism. When I was a pastor, I loved being a pastor much more than I loved being a bishop. I was a pastor in the same place for 15 years. It was a great privilege for me. And people sometimes say to me, don't you get discouraged when people come to you with their problems? Doesn't it weigh you down? And I would say no, because most often when people would leave after talking with me, I would be impressed at the way they carried on their lives, often with enormous challenges, and did so in ways that were truly heroic. And I mean, these are regular people, but how they bear up with certain challenges in their lives, their family lives. And to me, that's a tremendous source of hope. That's God present and working in the human heart and soul. And so I still find that the greatest source of hope in the church and the world.
Thank you. Yeah, wonderful. So we have a few minutes now for some questions from the audience. And I have them right here on this trusty iPad, actually. And the first one is from Kevin. Kevin is an alumnus. And the question is, what practical ways can a diocese, parish, or Catholic university encourage synodal listening among Catholics in order to foster common ground, finding common ground in our church and in our society? So what practical ways can a diocese, parish, or a Catholic university encourage synodal listening to foster finding common ground in our church and our society?
I'd say two methods. One is the synodal method in a sense of dialogue is basically this. You have to have people for a period of time, but basically you have each person prepares like a 3-minute statement on what they want to say on whatever the topic is. And you go around, you have prayer to begin with in scripture. Then everybody goes around and says their 3-minute worth. And no one interrupts. And we had a method in San Diego that was devised by two professors at the San Diego State who had developed it for prisons, because with prison groups, you got to make sure they don't interrupt. So it was a great method for that. But so you listen first to everybody. And then the second round, you speak about what you heard. You can't speak about what you talked about. It has to be over something else that you heard. And then the third tries to come to some common understanding. And the reason it's effective is everybody gets to say what they want to say. And everybody listens to what they say, and nobody interrupts it. And in the second round, people pick things from different elements, so it builds on it. So that kind of a method is a very effective way, because I say people who are not on the same wavelength really find it as a way of coming together. It's very helpful. The second thing is, it's just true in terms of all these things, of people telling their stories on any of these divisive issues. To understand what I said about compassion, to understand where compassion lies on various issues, is to hear people who are in that boat speak about it. And when they do, people are touched. Whatever the issue is, people are touched, whether it's a mother after an abortion and talking about that experience, or whether it's an immigrant, people are touched by that. And it draws out the humanity. So those are ways I think that the very type of conversation we need can be encouraged.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Cardinal. From Mary, a faculty member, how can church leaders and Catholics more generally call out objectionable policies without appearing partisan?
It's really hard. It's a very challenge. Someday I'd like to show you my emails, pro and con, depending what the issue is, whatever I'm speaking of. I do think it's important to be consistent with Catholic teaching. I do think it's important not to get into political figures at all. I never mentioned a political figure when I'm talking about an issue, ever, because that draws out the, fun. I'll talk about an issue or an action, but not name the people involved on one side or the other. But it's hard because people react against it as a political act, even if it's a moral question that has public policy, if they disagree.
Yeah. I mean, one of the great challenges is that people just self-censor then, because they know that it might trigger a reaction, a very negative reaction, be interpreted as partisan. So then people simply stop talking.
Well, that's why
they don't voice their views, and that's very problematic. It's especially problematic on a university campus where we should be discussing the hard topics and doing so respectfully.
That's why priests don't like to preach in any of these things.
Yeah.
You almost never hear homilies on these. I used to teach social teaching at our seminary, and I'd gather the guys afterwards, a few years afterwards, say, "Oh, how many of you are giving topic on any topic?" And the reason is they don't want to divide their people, and so that part of the gospel doesn't get preached. And I understand it, but it's and you've got the same thing here. Yeah,
got the same thing.
Exactly.
Same challenge for sure. This question is from Eric, an undergraduate student. How can we as a country promote patriotism while avoiding the dangers of nativism and extreme nationalism?
I think by having this aspirational notion of patriotism, that is, we are not a great nation because we were born here, or because of our economic power, or any of these things. Patriotism is this, for us as Americans, this set of aspirations. And that is a self-critical thing, Sometimes the patriotism that they're talking about as the counterpoints are canonizations of a society. all right, of saying that society is sacrosanct, or and and our patriotism is not that. It's precisely not that when it's at its best. It is aspirational in these wonderful ways, but then it is also self-critical by those same aspirations. And so I think there's a temper upon falling into these other, the nationalism, which really is, I'm here because of, I love my country because of ties of blood, or because I happen to be born here, and that's the primary way. But now, for us, we have the luxury of having this alternative starting point for us as a country that still must bind us. This has to be our patriotism, I think.
The next question is from Dennis, an alumnus. Archbishop Romero argued that love of the poor is a path to unity for society. How can concern for the poor and for the planet bring us closer together rather than be wedge issues which divide us?
I think in terms of love for the poor, part of it can be understanding what the reality of our assistance for the poor is. For example, we've had the cutoff of AID, assistance to the, most people think, when they do polling, most Americans think that about 15% of the budget goes to foreign aid, when in fact, for non-military foreign aid, it's less than 1%. And so I think partly clearing away a lot of the baggage in this discussion and allowing us to confront the thing of our bonds with the poor everywhere. Americans are generous in terms of private philanthropy and all of these ways that are wonderful bonding with the poor and a sign of love for the poor. And that for our society as a whole to have that same love is very, very important.
Great. And finally, the last question is from Kate, an undergraduate student. What can students do to reverse polarization? What can students do to reverse polarization?
I would say try to promote dialogue insofar as you can. I'd say don't eliminate discussions of topics because of afraid of frictions over them. I mean, we all have to do this delicately, but I'm afraid a lot of things don't get addressed now in the universities or within family. I mean, it's all across the board because of the desire of not causing friction. That's a danger. It's a danger for us as a society. So I'd say as students to try to promote dialogue that kind of builds on the relationships you have with people. So that if Notre Dame becomes a community known for its dialogue across the barriers society finds so destructive, that would be a wonderful thing.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Cardinal. That's really inspiring. Please. Maybe I can stand up here. So, Cardinal, this will be from a cardinal. This is a bust of a cardinal as well. This is actually a beautiful bronze of Cardinal John Henry Cardinal Newman, St. John Henry Cardinal Newman, who is being declared a doctor of the church. And this beautiful bronze of him at his desk writing was made by Father Anthony Lauk, a Holy Cross priest and artist here at Notre Dame, professor of art for many years. So Cardinal, please accept this gift as a token of our love and appreciation for you.
Happy.
It's a bit heavy.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe we can pose for this camera straight ahead.
Good. Okay.
There always has to be a photo. And It's a bit heavy.
Great.
But please join me in thanking Cardinal McElroy. Cardinal, you certainly give us hope. You're an amazing agent of hope. And your commitment to the gospel, your commitment to service of the church, you are a true servant leader. And I know that you're somebody who does his best to follow Jesus in word and deed. And we're so grateful for your presence here at Notre Dame. We're so grateful for your service to the church. Thank you very much. God bless you. And let's hear. Thank you.